You allow yourself that space to arrive at opinions that you might later disagree with, opinions that you might get judged for. Between last week's live stream, last week's Patreon content, and today's video, we're getting really down and dirty on the nitty-gritty of critical thinking. And this is stuff that I've really been learning for myself in recent months. You know, you think you're thinking critically, you think that you're applying critical thinking, but if you're not aware of some of the stuff we've been talking about lately, or some of the stuff that I want to talk about in this video, then it's possible that you might just think you're thinking critically when actually you're not. I'm not saying that to scare anybody or worry anybody. This has literally just been my experience, and you might find that you've had a different experience. That's absolutely fine. As ever, if you disagree with me or you want to share something of your own experience, then please consider doing that in the comments below. Just do it respectfully. We like to keep things civil around here. So if you've been around on this channel for a while, you'll know that I used to be in what I've now come to call an online pseudo-therapy cult with spiritual themes, and you'll also know that I used to be a new ager. I was heavily into this whole, church of vibes thing where, many people just absorb things that resonate with them and start to believe things without really thinking about them very critically, and it can have some really detrimental effects on your life. So that was where I was for a long time, and over the last couple of years, really, since I've been doing this on YouTube, I've been taking the time to really teach myself how to think critically. And I've gone through a number of phases with it. As I've talked about recently on the channel, I've been through a very cynical, almost overly skeptical phase where, if I couldn't imagine a way in which something was true, then I wasn't interested in it being true. And skepticism is really important. I think skepticism is a foundational piece of critical thinking. When it becomes cynicism, it can become it can ruin any attempt to try to understand something, I think. So for me, over these last couple of years, what I've really been learning to do is think in a way that is true to my experience and tangibly mine. And that last point there, tangibly mine, is super important. I think that's something that I've found in my experience to be the most important part of critical thinking. And I've learned that not because I've had so many experiences where my thinking has been tangibly mine, but because I've had so many where it wasn't. And you can really tell the difference, because when you're thinking for yourself, your thoughts, your exploration of ideas has that quality of uncovering, has that quality of discovery that it doesn't have if you think you're thinking for yourself and you're sort of believing that you're thinking critically, but you actually don't. There's a real difference between thinking for yourself and the process of thinking being your own, than not thinking for yourself, but thinking you're thinking for yourself, and sort of going through things that you already know are true, not really pushing the boat out in any real direction, and then ending up arriving at a conclusion that you already thought was true anyway. And that's something that I spoke about in the Patreon content for last week. So if you want to check that out, then join Patreon, $2 lowest tier. You can get access to that and loads of other audio companions, including the one that's going to go out this week with this video. So here's the thing, and this is where we really get into what I think of as being, a major death blow to critical thinking. For me, a big part of really learning to think critically has been getting okay with my opinions not being the right ones, not being ones that other people approve of necessarily. That's not saying to be closed-minded or to not be open to changing your opinion or looking for ways in which you might be wrong or being open to being wrong. It's none of that. What it is being able to recognize that what's more important than having the right opinion every single time is that you yourself have explored the information and arrived at an opinion organically to you. Now, that doesn't mean that the opinion you're going to arrive at is a good one. That doesn't mean the opinion you're going to arrive at is a correct one factually, or one that necessarily other people will morally agree with. And it can change after the fact if you continue to explore things. But the most important part, I think, of this, especially when it comes to critical thinking, is that you allow yourself that space to arrive at opinions that you might later disagree with, opinions that you might get judged for, And that's especially difficult these days on the internet because, every opinion that isn't morally acceptable by the majority is a cancelable offense at the moment, especially on Twitter, right? So that can be kind of a scary thing, but you don't actually have to share those opinions publicly if you don't want to. Like, you can have opinions in the privacy of your own mind. I think a lot of times we forget that online. But you don't have to share every opinion you have on Twitter or on Instagram or whatever. Speaking of Instagram, some of what I've been talking about here, I've actually drawn from a post that I put out on Instagram yesterday as I'm recording this. So if you want to check that out, follow me over on Insta. I'm posting all the time on there about my own personal journey, exploring these kinds of concepts and in my own healing and recovery from some of the shit that I've been through in my life. I think the big thing with this is being able to maintain a boundary between your inner world and the external world. And I think it's super, super important that, like, within the confines of your own mind, within your relationship with yourself, within your own inner world, you're on good terms with yourself. I think that is foundational to being able to, like, exist as an individual in the world, and that's a big part of what critical thinking really comes down to. And this leads me to the point I made on this on my Instagram, which is, critical thinking withers away when you let the opinions and beliefs of other people stop you from exploring all your options, for seeing things from as many different points of view as you can imagine are reasonable points of view to see something from, and even unreasonable points of view, like being able to explore things completely. If you let the way other people see things, the way other people believe things to be, other people's beliefs and opinions, if you let that stop you from thinking and exploring as much of an issue as possible, then your ability to think for yourself is going to be limited by that acceptable range of ideas, of opinions, of beliefs. So this brings me to another point on critical thinking, which is that if we aren't recognizing the limits of our knowledge, then it's so easy for bullshit to slip in through the cracks. It's so easy for us to end up believing things because it makes sense to us based on limited knowledge in a certain area, And if we don't have certain skills in certain areas, for example, scientific literacy, if we're not able to look at, like, a scientific study and pull from it some useful information that can help us understand something better, then in certain instances you can be the best critical thinker in the world, but it's not going to help you. You're not going to arrive at something that's genuinely going to make your life better, let's say, or give you an opinion or a belief that is functional or helpful in some way. Critical thinking is overall one of the most important skills I think that any of us can have. And when I say skills, I mean skills. It's not something that we're born with. Some of us might be more prone to skepticism, for example, based on the lives we've had. But critical thinking really is a skill. It really is something that you have to practice. It's like a muscle, and if you don't use it, you will lose it. And I think that it's so important these days because there's so much disinformation on the internet. There's just so much bullshit that, you can go to, and it can make you feel a certain way. It can hook into an emotion that you've got or a belief that you've got, and it can perhaps appeal to a lack of knowledge that you might have, a lack of awareness about something that you might have. And you can walk away feeling like, having had the experience of thinking for yourself to some extent, believing you've had that experience, and then end up believing something that is false, that you haven't arrived at through the actual active process of thinking for yourself, that does have that quality of uncovering and discovery. And it can end up going really badly. And I'm sure we've all seen times where that's happened to ourselves and to the people we care about. So to that end, I think a functional, tangible understanding of how critical thinking functions, what it looks like, what it feels like, and how important it really is, goes a long way to keeping us safe from some of the bullshit that's circulating these days. But most importantly, in my mind, it enables us to maintain a sense of individuality, enables us to stay free from destructive spirituality, destructive cults and things like that. And helps us to maintain our own sense of autonomy and independence as we're exploring the world, meeting people, coming across new ideas, and learning and growing as people. I'm Andy Fellows, and this channel is all about living life with integrity and independence of mind in the face of destructive spirituality, destructive cults, and toxic online culture. If you enjoyed this video today, please consider subscribing to the channel, and to get extra content from me every single week, check out the Patreon. There's a link to that in the description and on the end card. Otherwise, please be kind and ask good questions, and I'll see you in the next one.